All right, let's plug in and crank it up. We are about to go on a whirlwind tour through the history of one of the most powerful, most influential types of music ever created, rock music. So what is it that makes a rock song a rock song? You know, is it just the loud guitars, the pounding drums, that rebellious attitude? Well, yeah, it's kinda all of that. But to really get it, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning, to see how all those pieces first came together. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're gonna jump through the decades, starting with that first spark in the 50s, all the way to what's happening today. We'll see how the sound totally transformed and, how it changed the world right along with it. All right, first stop, the 1950s. See, rock music didn't just pop up out of thin air. It was more like a musical stew, a mix of all these incredible sounds that were already bubbling up across America. And they called this new sound rock and roll. Just think about it. You take this soul and energy from rhythm and blues and gospel music. You mix in the storytelling you'd hear in country, and then you crank it all up with a really fast driving beat. For teenagers back then, who were mostly listening to pretty slow pop music, wow, this was a total game changer. It was absolutely electric. But the real secret ingredient? The technology. The electric guitar literally changed everything. All of a sudden, one musician could be just massive, super loud, and they could create these wild new sounds using effects, like distortion. You know that awesome, fuzzy, gritty sound you hear in heavy rock? That's it. So the guitar wasn't just an instrument anymore. It became this powerful symbol of rebellion and pure creativity. And this was the tool that made it all possible. We're talking about 8 to 10 pounds of wood and wire. I mean, that's about the weight of a big house cat. But in the right hands, it was powerful enough to give a voice to an entire generation. Okay, let's jump forward into the 60s. This is where rock music really started to spread its wings, going global and getting super creative. And it kicked off with what everyone calls the British invasion. I mean, you had bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones coming all the way from the UK, and they just took over America. They weren't just playing the same old rock and roll either. Their songs were getting more complex, their lyrics were smarter, they were completely rewriting the rules for what a pop song could even be. And things just kept getting weirder, in the best way possible. This new style called psychedelic rock popped up. Artists started treating the recording studio like it was its own instrument. Seriously, they were playing tapes backwards, adding all these strange echoes and effects. It was all about creating these mind-bending soundscapes. And the lyrics? They went from "I love you, baby" to exploring dreams, society, and big ideas. It was like there were no rules anymore. And the live shows, they became absolutely massive. At festivals like Woodstock, the sound systems were so powerful the volume could top 110 decibels. To put that in perspective, that is as loud as a jet engine. Imagine being in a crowd of thousands of people, all feeling that music. It was this huge, powerful, shared experience. So, after all that creative explosion in the 60s, rock kind of splintered in the 70s. It went into two totally opposite directions. Some bands wanted to get even bigger, louder, more epic, while others wanted to tear it all down and get back to something raw and simple. So on one hand, you got hard rock and heavy metal. Think bands like Led Zeppelin. They took the volume knob and just cranked it. The drums were thunderous, the guitar riffs were super aggressive, and the concerts? Whoa, they were these giant spectacles with fire, explosions, and walls of speakers. It was all about raw power. But then you had the total opposite, a rebellion against all of that big flashy stuff. It was called punk rock. And it was basically a reaction to those giant, super-produced rock bands. The idea behind punk was so simple and so powerful. You don't have to be a virtuoso musician. You just need 3 chords and something to scream about. And here's the basic recipe for punk rock. The songs, super short, super fast. The guitars, you often only needed 3 chords. The fashion was totally DIY, do it yourself. People would rip up their own clothes and stick them back together with safety pins. This whole scene wasn't happening in giant stadiums. It was born in small, sweaty clubs. It was all about that raw, unfiltered energy. All right, now we're heading into another era of huge contrasts. The 80s, where rock became bigger than ever, followed by the 90s, where an entirely new sound bubbled up from the underground to challenge it. The 80s were the age of stadium rock. And I mean that literally. Bands were playing in these massive football stadiums to crowds of 50,000 people or even more. You had bands like Queen or U2 who became absolute masters at making a show feel huge and personal at the same time. And you can see the shift right here. The 90s were a total 180 from the 80s. That big, flashy style, gone. Replaced with just regular clothes, like flannel shirts. Those giant stadiums, nope. It was back to small, intimate clubs. And that polished, epic sound, it got traded for something way more raw, emotional, and personal. And that raw new sound had a name, grunge. It mostly came out of one city, Seattle. Bands like Nirvana took the power of heavy metal and mashed it up with the attitude of punk. The lyrics were brutally honest, often about feeling frustrated or sad. And it just connected. It spoke to a whole generation that felt like nobody was listening. So, we've covered all these different styles, right? From punk to psychedelic to stadium rock. But underneath it all, most rock songs share a kind of secret blueprint. You've got the intro to grab your attention, the verse, which tells the story, the chorus, that's the super catchy part you sing along to, then you get that awesome guitar solo, and finally, the big finish. It's a simple formula, but man, it works. Which brings us pretty much up to today. And, well, the world is a completely different place now, especially when it comes to how we make and listen to music. I mean, the internet totally changed the game, right? We went from CDs and vinyl records to digital files. Now, with streaming, you've got pretty much every song ever recorded right at your fingertips, which is awesome for us and great for new bands to get their music out there. But it's also made it way, way harder for artists to actually make a living selling their music. But here's the thing. Even with all these changes in technology and style, the spirit of rock and roll, that hasn't changed a bit. It's more than just a type of music. It's an attitude. It's about energy, about honesty, and about having the guts to be exactly who you are and to be loud about it. And you know what? That spirit is never going away. So the real question isn't, is rock dead? The real question is, what's next? What's the next rebellion going to sound like? With all the new tools and new ideas out there, the story of rock is definitely not over, not by a long shot.